Anyway, he thought he would help us by sitting on the crocodile. So he straddled the crocodile like he was about to climb on a horse. But there was no head but he was facing forward. So he was facing where the crocodile's head had been. And as he put his pressure of his buttocks basically just behind the crocodile's front shoulders, that crocodile stood up, turned 90 degrees and started walking towards the river without its head on.
Welcome to the Big Game Hunting Podcast, where we help hunters like you prepare for the big game hunting adventures you've always dreamed of. Now, here's your host, John McAdams.
Hello, John McAdams here. Welcome to episode 178 of the Big Game Hunting Podcast. Kevin Robertson is back today to talk about crocodile hunting. Like you just heard, he has some absolutely hair-raising tales about hunting crocodile in Africa. Today we will really get into the nuts and bolts of crocodile hunting. Where to go, how to evaluate trophy crocodile, what their anatomy is like, where to shoot them, and how things can go wrong on a crocodile hunt. As always, we also talk a lot about cartridge and bullet selection, as well as terminal ballistics, and specifically how that all relates to crocodile hunting. Now, in that vein, Kevin mentions a couple of photographs of crocodile that demonstrate just how darn big they can get. I will put copies of those photographs on the show notes page for this episode, as well as on Instagram. Follow me there to check those out, and my handle is @TheBigGameHunter. Before we get started with all of that, I have a couple things I need your help with. First, please pause this show right now and hit the subscribe or follow button in whatever podcast app you use. If you're not already subscribed, doing so now will be a big favor to me and will help me beat the big tech algorithms to reach more hunters like you who are interested in this sort of content. So please subscribe. Next, sign up for my email list at huntingguns101.com. You'll get my free ebook when you do so, and you will also receive the email updates I send out every weekday. If you like the Big Game Hunting Podcast, you will love those emails. Like the podcast, I talk about all sorts of things in those emails. Cartridge and bullet selection, hunting in Africa, funny hunting stories, cautionary hunting stories, etc. I also send out an in-stock email update every Friday to everyone on the list with some of the latest news on ammo I have found and where you can get it. I get feedback all the time from people who get those emails telling me how much they enjoy them. And if you decide you don't like them later, you can unsubscribe and you'll never hear from me again. That's huntingguns101.com. Or send me an email, john@thebiggamehuntingblog.com, and tell me you want to join the list. Finally, I want to plug Kevin's books, specifically The Perfect Shot 2 and It Shouldn't Happen. It Shouldn't Happen is a very entertaining collection of stories Kevin has amassed over the years. He's told some of them here on the podcast, but he fleshes those stories out in more detail in the book. But many of the other stories in the book will be completely new to you. I laughed out loud while reading most of them, and I'm sure you will as well. Now, The Perfect Shot was a revolutionary book when Kevin first published it back in the late 1990s. It is still an incredibly useful resource today, especially the updated edition that is currently in print. If you have an upcoming hunt in Africa, or if you're just dreaming about hunting in Africa one day, then you need to buy this book and carefully study what he has to say. The information inside it is invaluable and reflects Kevin's decades of hard-earned experience as a professional hunter in Africa. If you pay attention to what he has to say and use the book as a guide to prepare for your hunt, you will increase your odds of success, reduce the chances of something going wrong, and just have more fun over there. Plus, the book is really interesting and entertaining. Go to thebiggamehuntingblog.com/Kevin, Kevin, to learn more about those books, and you can also purchase a copy there to help support the Big Game Hunting Podcast in the process. Okay, now let's get started talking about crocodile hunting. Well, Kevin, once again, it is great having you back on the show.
My pleasure, John. Got some interesting crocodile stories for you.
You know, I'm looking forward to it. And crocodile are one of those interesting species that are very different from everything else we've talked about to this point. So can you share one of your more interesting or hair-raising encounters that you've had with them over the years?
I sure can. So crocodiles have been around for 130 million years. they were around when the dinosaurs ruled this earth. And whatever sorted the dinosaurs out, the crocodiles seem to have survived that cataclysmic event because they are absolutely prehistoric creatures. So you may recall when we discussed elephants, I took the Raja of Hyderabad on a buffalo hunt in the Zambezi Valley.
Mm-hmm.
He was the guy that was so fascinated by the tamarind tree that we camped under. But on that hunt as well, we had another request. He wanted a crocodile that needed to be at least 14 foot in length. And the reason for that, in his palace in Hyderabad, he had a solid crystal billiard table. So that's a full-size billiard table made out of one piece of crystal. And apparently there are only 5 of these billiard tables in the world, and he had one of them, and he wanted a crocodile skin to lie on his billiard table. So there was a size recommendation. The crocodile had to be at least 14 foot in length. So I knew of a place in the Sapi where the Sapi is the safari area below Mana Pools, and I'd hunted there before, and just downstream from the camp where we would be camping was a little backwater, and on the side of this backwater was a rock that had a hole in it. And I knew about this rock with a hole in it, so I took along a sturdy piece of chain, a good length of chain, and we shot a buffalo, and we laboriously dragged this buffalo down to the water's edge, and we chained it to this rock. And then at last light, we had a couple of buckets full of blood and gore, which we chucked into this little backwater to attract all the crocodiles. The next morning, we went down to check on the buffalo, and the buffalo had disappeared, and there were just crocodiles everywhere. So we shot an impala, and we chained an impala to the rock. And on the next morning, the impala disappeared. And this little backwater and where this rock was only a mile or so downstream from camp. So we would just walk down to see what was going on. And on the third morning, as we were walking to check what was going on, there was a big dog baboon, a big male baboon, was sort of arrogantly swaggering along down the banks of the Zambezi. And I said to All His Highness, you better shoot that baboon because we're going to need some bait. So he drilled this baboon, and we picked it up, and we were carrying it. And as we got to the water's edge, where this head of this jaws of a crocodile just surfaced. So let me just back off a little bit. The hardest thing with a crocodile is to judge its length. If you take how long is your pickup truck, for example, if you look at your pickup truck from a distance, it's pretty hard to judge if your pickup truck's 12, 13, 14, 15 foot long. But a crocodile, the distance from its nostril to its eye in inches is the same as its length in feet. And I always found that if a crocodile's swimming in water, you can see the two nostrils and you can see his eyes, and then just behind the eyes we have what we call the ear ridges. And it's quite easy to judge 12 inches, 13 inches, up to 15, 16 inches. I found that much easier to judge that distance than to judge the distance in feet. Anyway, as we got to the water's edge, we were about to chain this baboon to the rock when this head of this monstrous crocodile just surfaced. And you could just see it was knobbly and dark and had all these big, really sort of exaggerated gums. And so I said to His Highness, listen, we just put that baboon down on the water's edge, and we turned around and we walked straight away. I said to him, don't even think about this crocodile. We're going to go and find a nice shady spot and have a snooze. So we walked about a mile away from the river. We found a nice big shady Natal mahogany tree, and we lay down and we had a sleep for 2 hours. And then we crept back into the blind. Now we'd set it up so there was a waterway, an erosion gully coming into this little backwater, and on a slightly bit of higher ground we'd built a blind, and I had a mattress for His Highness to lie on, and we'd filled sandbags for a dead rest and sandbag for his elbow, and we even put a bit of shade over the top, so he was going to shoot from the prone position. It wasn't a particularly long shot, probably 50 meters, but we'd actually measured that distance exactly. This was the days before rangefinders. So I'd taken a ball of string, and we'd actually measured the distance from the shooting position to where we thought this crocodile would be lying. And we actually even measured the downward angle. And then I went to a dry riverbed, and we recreated the exact same shooting scenario, and I sighted his rifle in. he was using my Browning A-Bolt Medallion 375. We were shooting a reduced velocity 300 grain, a bullet called a Dead Tough. It was a
A squared?
A squared Dead Tough, which was a really good bullet, doing 2,350 feet per second. So we sneaked into this blind, and it was on sand, because crocodiles are amazing. I believe that they can almost read your thoughts, but they can also feel your vibrations if you're walking over hard ground. So we approached the blind in almost like beach sand, walking very slowly, got into the blind, got all his harness comfortable, and there, exactly where we thought he would be, was this just ginormous crocodile. I mean, it was just... So he took his time, and there's basically only two shot placement options on the crocodile. You either go for the brain shot or you go for the neck shot just behind the smile. So here I said, okay, go for the brain shot. So all crocodiles, when their mouths are closed, they've got this L-shaped bend in their smile. And so what it is, you just go on top of the bend between the eye and the ear, forms like a triangle in the middle between the eye and the ear, just above the smile, because remember, you're shooting at a slight downwards angle. That's the position of the brain. And the crocodile's brain, we say it as big as a golf ball. That's not quite true. The crocodile's brain is probably the size of your thumb. Anyway, this old Roger could shoot really well, and the rifle was sighted in exactly for that shooting distance, and he took his time on a dead rest, and he fired, and the top of this crocodile's head just exploded. Anyway, so I jumped out of the blind, ran up with Special, my tracker. We jumped on the back of this crocodile, and I grabbed his muzzle, and with some rope, I tied his mouth closed, and then I tied his front legs behind his back, and I tied his back legs behind his back, and rolled him away from the river. But he was so huge. I mean, that body with that crocodile was the size of a horse's body. I mean, it was just enormous. So that was the first crocodile I'd ever hunted, and and we hear all these stories about crocodiles becoming alive again and all that. But you could see his brain. His whole brain pan had lifted up, and I could see his brain. I mean, the bullet had actually broken up, and there was this massive damage to the top of his head. So we eventually, I was convinced he was dead, and now you can't take a photograph of a crocodile when it's all trussed up like a Christmas turkey. So I pushed his back of his head down, and we took the ropes off, and we washed the blood off, and we took the trophy photograph. And if you look on page 130 of my perfect shot, that's all his harness with my 375, and that's the mouth of the crocodile. And you can actually see we'd actually wrapped the barrel of the 375 in burlap because it was sticking out through the blind, and I was very worried that the crocodile would see the sun reflecting off the barrel. Anyway, his old harness said to me, I want the skull for a skull mount. So with my sheath knife and an axe, I removed that crocodile's head. So the crocodile's head was lying to the side, and because that crocodile was so big, we couldn't get it back to camp. We had to skin it there. So we started the laborious process of skinning this crocodile, and he wanted the feet done. And to skin a crocodile properly, it took forever because, they've got the claws and their toes, and he wanted all the feet done properly. So while we were busy skinning, all of a sudden this crocodile started to squirm, and the back tail started to slowly flick backwards and forwards. And now we were trying to skin it while this whole thing was moving. And it became very difficult. And we had a game scout called Gift, and we called him the giftless one because he was not the sharpest tool in the shed. Anyway, he thought he would help us by sitting on the crocodile. So he straddled the crocodile like he was about to climb on a horse. But there was no head he was facing forward. So he was facing where the crocodile's head had been. And as he put his pressure of his buttocks basically just behind the crocodile's front shoulders, that crocodile stood up, turned 90 degrees, and started walking towards the river without its head on. And I've told the story many times, and everybody says to me, geez, man, what were you smoking? That's bloody impossible. But I used to play rugby when I was in my younger days, and I was quite a good rugby player. And we dived on that crocodile, and we had to tie that crocodile up with his legs behind his back, and he didn't have his head on. Anyway, eventually we finished skinning that crocodile. It took 5 hours to skin the crocodile. And this Indian fellow, being a typical Indian, said to me, "Oh, come on, Kevin, man, let's cut this crocodile open. Maybe he's swallowed a rich American and we'll find a Rolex watch inside." Those were his exact words. So we opened up the crocodile, and in its stomach was that baboon whole. So he'd swallowed a big male baboon. And I've got my 6-year-old grandson staying with us at the moment, and he's in the 98th percentile for height and weight, so he's a fine young little fellow, and that baboon was bigger than him. So he swallowed that baboon whole, and I've sent you those pictures yesterday of that crocodile swallowing a whole impala, so you can imagine how big a crocodile can get. Anyway, we removed the crocodile, and I also took out the crocodile's heart, and on page 131 of my perfect shot, there's a picture of my trucker's hand called Special holding that crocodile's heart, and that crocodile's heart was still beating 5 hours after we chopped his head off. I mean, that's just, the heart is still beating.
My goodness.
I mean, these things are absolutely incredible. So while we were busy skinning this thing, the vultures were circling around, and so we rolled the skin onto a pole. We picked up the head, and we just left the crocodile on the sandy little bay, on the banks of the sandy little backwater. The next morning, I was very interested to see what was left of the crocodile. So we walked back down to the river, that same spot the next morning, and the crocodile had disappeared. There was lots of vulture droppings and vulture feathers, and there was hyena tracks. And of that crocodile, there was no sign. Everything had disappeared. But that baboon was still lying there untouched. It had all turned, the acid juices of the crocodile's stomach had turned it sort of a butter yellow color. And a week later, that baboon was still lying on the bank. Nothing touched that baboon. Eventually, we just kicked it into the river. Nothing touched it. Yeah, so that was firsthand. And it always worried me, how the hell did that crocodile know to turn in the right direction towards the river? He didn't know where his head was. I mean, he didn't have his head on. But he definitely turned, why didn't he turn away from the river? But he definitely turned straight towards the river. So when I was writing the perfect shot, I had no idea what the anatomy of a crocodile looks like. A crocodile was one of the species that wasn't covered when I was at veterinary school, and I had no idea what a crocodile looked inside. So at Kariba, there was a crocodile farm, and I did mention when I was talking about hunting that big elephant that we shot in the Tarara, how the Kariba crocodile farm came and recovered all the meat. So I went to the crocodile farm and I purchased a 1.5 meter long crocodile. They had one in that batch that wasn't quite as big as the others. They thought it was a bit of a runty crocodile. They said, "No, they'd let me buy that." And I didn't know how to kill this damn crocodile. So we just took this crocodile and we chucked it in a blast freezer. So they had this huge big blast freezer where they used to freeze all the elephant meat and all the meat that they used to feed the crocodiles. And we just chucked this crocodile in there and we just froze him until he was as stiff as a surfboard. And then I wrapped him up in brown paper and I drove back to the little town of Karoi, which was like 2 hours away. And it was on a Saturday morning, I'll never forget. And I walked into the butcher shop with this brown surfboard under my arm. And the butcher said to me, "What the hell you got there?" I said, "Don't even ask me. I want you to cut it. Just cut it in half." And with his bandsaw that he was used to for chopping up chops and cutting up carcasses, we just cut this crocodile exactly straight down the middle. And then I took those 2 frozen halves home and I thawed them out. And so the results you see of my beautiful anatomy diagrams of the crocodile, that's how I managed to get the artist to paint those pictures, was from cutting that crocodile in half. But while I was at the crocodile farm, I said to them, I wanted to see what they do. And they grow these crocodiles out until they're 1.5 meters. Then when they're ready to be slaughtered, they shoot them with a 22. And they take them to the slaughter area and they cut them behind the skull to expose the spinal cord. And then they had a long, it was like a corkscrew, but on a spring, a long sort of corkscrew, which they then threaded into the spinal cord. And what they would do then, they would strip out the spinal cord. So they would cut the crocodile's head off, and then they would strip out his spinal cord. So I said to him, why do you do that? He said, no, because the crocodile doesn't have a brain and a spinal cord like you and I have. Their brain extends into the spinal cord. So the brain and the spinal cord one. So when you chop his head off, he's still got brain material in his body. And they said they had an incident where they took a crocodile and they chopped his head off. But before they could strip out his spinal cord, he jumped off the table, ran down the passage and back into the pen where he had come from without his head on. So,
oh my goodness.
These things are, they're quite freaky in a way, So anyway, so that was my story. So then I eventually was able to make the anatomy diagrams. But I used to freelance hunt, and I lived in Karoi, and there were lots of safari areas up and down the Zambezi Valley. And one of them was a guy called Dave Joubert. He owned the Chetty Safari area, and you may recall I did a hunt there with the Indian fellow that developed 3 testicles in the honey. So when I was chatting to him, he came to see me one day in my farm, and I looked at him, and his left hand was crunched. It was almost sort of claw-like. And I said to him, what the hell happened to your hand? And he said, he had an accident with a crocodile. So I said, what the hell happened? So he said, no, they were he used to hunt as well, and they shot a 15-foot crocodile, which is a serious crocodile, on the banks of the Zambezi, but they got there by boat, and they had a 16-foot speedboat, and there's no ways you can put a 15-foot crocodile into a 16-foot speedboat. I mean, that croc's just too big. So they lashed the crocodile to the side of the boat, and then they were just putting down the Zambezi with this supposedly dead crocodile tied to the side of the boat. And they said they'd been going a few hours when suddenly the crocodile, he said, came alive again. And the crocodile started to roll. And in the process of rolling, it turned the boat over. And what had happened, he got his hand caught in one of the ropes, and as this crocodile was rolling, it just crushed all the bones in his hand. But the client was sitting in the boat, and the client had his video camera bag, which in it he had his passport, and he had all his traveler's checks and his rifle. So as the boat turned over, his rifle fell into the river, he lost his camera bag, he lost his passport, and then they were all upside down, floating down the river, the Zambezi, with a crocodile thrashing around on an upside-down boat. So,
my goodness.
Sure and that's not what many people would, probably a worst-case scenario for many people. But this phenomenon of coming alive again is very well documented. I was hunting in the Zambezi on another situation, and there were some South Africans were hunting in the Nyakasanga Safari area, and there was a channel with an island on it, and they shot this massive crocodile on the island. So they left one of the African laborers there to go watch the crocodile while they went back to camp. They had to go and get a boat and then bring the boat and launch the boat so they could get to the island, and then they were going to float the crocodile across with the boat and then put the crocodile on the boat trailer to get it back to camp. And of course they were away a couple of hours, and there was this crocodile lying on the bank stone dead, and then all of a sudden the crocodile just stood up and slid into the water and just disappeared. And the guys get there and said, where's the crocodile? And then the guy said, no, he just stood up and disappeared into the water. And there's also other stories of crocodile. We had another hunt, we had the crocodile actually hanging in camp. So he was in camp, hanging by his lower jaw on the slaughter pole in the slaughter shed. And everybody taking photographs. And all of a sudden, the crocodile's eye opened and he started to spin. So he was in the camp spinning while he was suspended by his jaw. And then my guy had to rush and get his 4.58 and shoot the crocodile again in camp. And they also said to us, if you ever hunted a crocodile by boat, you had to take it. The recommended was to take a bag of corks with you. So I said, why the hell do you need corks? I said, no, because if that crocodile is going to come alive again in the boat, and then you have to shoot him in the boat, and you're going to shoot a hole through your boat. So the corks are to plug the holes that you have to shoot in your boat. Which I see which is not true. A crocodile cannot come alive again, but they are. What actually happens as the crocodile starts to decompose? Okay, crocodiles are this dark, grey, almost blackish color, and they absorb heat quite quickly. And then, as they start to decompose, part of the Krebs cycle produces lactic acid. You know, the reason why you hang a a side of beef in a fridge for 2 weeks is so that the meat can condition and get tender. Why it gets tender is that the pH of that meat changes as a result of lactic acid, which is the breakdown of the glycogen in the muscles. But with a crocodile, that lactic acid stimulates the neuromuscular junction. So that stimulates the nerve endings, which makes that crocodile appear as if he's coming alive again. But I've got a friend who was a professional crocodile. He used to cull crocodiles. He personally shot 3,000 crocodiles. But they used to shoot them at night. And then as soon as they got them into the boat, what they would do, they would duct tape their muzzles closed. And then with an axe, they would chop them behind the head to sever the spinal cord. And then often they said, while they were driving sitting on these crocodiles, those crocodiles would start squirming and moving around, even though it was at night, which slowed down the decomposition process. So they didn't come alive again as quickly when it was colder.
Man, this is all stuff like out of a horror movie that you're talking about, with these headless crocodiles, running around and heading towards the water and things like that. That's just stuff out of my nightmares.
Nobody believes me. They all thought we used to smoke something when we were on safari, which I can assure you we didn't. The worst thing we did was drink scotch. But I mean, they are prehistoric. They are absolutely prehistoric. I mean, for that thing's heart to still be beating 5 hours after his head's been chopped off. I mean, good heavens, It was a real eye-opener. But I love hunting crocodiles because they're such a challenge to hunt. They all have these, what we call the feathered watchdogs. When they're lying on the bank, they'll always have plovers, and some of the water birds sometimes even go, if they're lying with their mouths open, will actually go and clean their teeth, pick up little bits of meat off there. And as soon as you walk along, as soon as you disturb those birds, the crocodile will know exactly what's going on, especially if he's been hunted before. And I'm sure they feel the vibrations of your feet as you're walking along on the banks. And then if you just think about it, they just seem to know, and all of a sudden they just disappear. They go into the water. Now, they're a really challenging, interesting animal to hunt. They really are.
Well, let's back up just a little bit and talk about crocodile just in more general terms, what their life cycle is like, how big they get, what they eat, that sort of thing.
Okay, well, crocodiles are reptiles. So they lay eggs. They are what you call poikilothermic. Poikilothermic is a creature that does not maintain a constant body temperature. So you are homeothermic, or all mammals are homeothermic. That means our body temperature stays at a constant 36 or 36.5 degrees centigrade. If it's too hot, we start sweating. If it's too cold, we start shivering. Crocodiles, their body temperature changes with that of the environment. And crocodiles are nocturnal. They eat mainly fish. Their diet is mainly fish, so they spend their nights in water feeding. They've got very good eyesight, which obviously they can probably see at night, or use the stars, use the sky as a silhouette. But so their body, gradually during the night, their body takes on the temperature of the water. And then when it's sunny the next day, they'll all go and lie on the bank and bask in the sun, and that's just to basically get their metabolism up again. If it gets really, really hot, they'll sort of half submerge themselves in water, and they also lie with their mouths open, where they're breathing over the mucous membranes of their mouth as a cooling effect. So they, with sort of like panting and submerging themselves in water and then lying in the sun, they can keep their body temperature pretty constant, but it's a fluctuation up and down. Crocodiles lay eggs. They lay eggs in the hot times of the year. They dig a hole in the sand near the water's edge, and they'll lay up to 100 eggs very carefully lay them into the sand. And the environmental temperature then hatches those eggs. I believe the incubation period is 45 days. And then, so if they're laying those eggs in October, they sort of start hatching towards the second half of November, which generally coincides with the start of the rainy season in southern Africa. Initially, when they hatch, little crocodiles are very susceptible to predation. They get eaten by everything, mainly by monitor lizards. Hyenas will eat them. And then when they get into the water, those little crocodiles, hatchlings, are susceptible to being eaten by tigerfish, They get eaten by other crocodiles. So in nature, only 1% of the crocodiles that hatch will reach maturity, survive. When we talk about the crocodile population just now, there was a huge industry in Zimbabwe and all over southern Africa where people go and collect the crocodile eggs because they have these nesting sites where they have these sandy beaches where all the crocs go and lay eggs, just like the turtles come and lay eggs on the Bahamas and places like that. So the industry was based around collecting those eggs and then artificially incubating them. And all those eggs are fertilized. And then when those crocodiles got to 1.5 meters long, which was the length when they would be slaughtered for their skins, and that's the length when they would normally survive if you have to release them in the wilds, the legislation said that 5% of all the eggs that were collected had to be returned back to nature as 1.5 meter long crocodiles. And in Lake Kariba, for example, where I used to do a lot of fishing and skin diving and we used to swim, the crocodile population, if you keep on putting 5% of the crocodiles back when only 1% would survive naturally, obviously over a couple of decades you've got a massive crocodile overpopulation. So initially those little crocodiles eat water insects, so they hatch in conjunction with the rainy season, and there's always mosquito larvae, and there's always little bugs that are around the water, and that's what the little crocodiles eat, and they eat little tadpoles, and then they start eating little fish, and as they get bigger, they live on fish. Only till such time as they get so massive and so heavy that they are too slow to catch fish, will they then start turning to mammals. They'll start catching animals that come down to drink. But that stage, that crocodile is probably 20 or 30 years old. They're very long-lived species. I mean, it's not unusual for crocodiles to live over 100 years. And as they get bigger, they get more massive and they get more heavy. So if you take a 13-foot crocodile, for example, and you compare it to a 50-foot crocodile, that 15-foot crocodile probably weighs 25% more than the 13-footer because as they get bigger, they just get larger and more round, and they get these big jowls, and they just get this big belly, and they just get big and slow. But they're an amazing animal. When I was researching my perfect shot, I read up quite a bit about crocodiles, and I read one story where there was a professional crocodile hunter on Lake Malawi, which was Nyasaland in those days. And this guy used to go out, and all he did was hunt crocodiles for their skins, and that was his business. And he happened to capture a large crocodile, but he'd run out of salt. He didn't have enough salt to cure this crocodile's skin, so he didn't want to kill it and then have the skin to go to waste. So he chained that crocodile to a tree, put a chain around behind its front legs, and he chained it to a tree. And his intention was to go and deliver his skins, get some more salt, come back, and he was going to knock this crocodile on the head and skin it. But he forgot about the crocodile. And he came back to that tree a year later, and that crocodile was still alive. It had dug itself a little shallow sort of groove in the ground like a grave. It was very thin. It had probably got some rainwater and might have caught a few rats and mice or something like that. But that crocodile survived a year being chained to a tree. So they are, they're incredible animals. They are prehistoric. There's no doubt about it. They are absolutely prehistoric.
And so is this a deal that once they get past, say, like a meter long or so, they really don't have any predators?
Well, they do. They eat each other. They'll kill each other. They'll certainly, once they get past probably 1.5 meters, 2 meters, they don't really have many predators, except I suppose a really big crocodile might eat a smaller crocodile. These really big guys. But you see those crocodiles. On Discovery Channel and stuff, you see the wildebeest migration, where these crocodile, the wildebeest and the zebras are crossing the Masai Mara River and places like that, and they've got these massive big crocodiles. And I sent you a couple of photographs there's a crocodile with just about got a whole zebra in its mouth. Those crocodiles, they're so massive and they're so big they can't catch fish. Those crocodiles eat once a year. That's their That's their feast time. And they eat enough over that period during those migrations that they can sustain themselves for the rest of the year. They might catch a little odd thing now and again, but they're so big and so heavy, they can really catch these animals when they're swimming across those, they're forging those rivers in their thousands, and it's just easy for them to catch their prey. And also the ones that drown and the ones that break their legs and things like that, those are the ones that the crocodiles feed on. But that migration period is the only time of the year when those big crocodiles actually can actually feed easily.
Interesting. Can you talk about how old crocodiles get and how that relates to their size?
Well, I don't think... Basically, they just keep on growing until they eventually die. I don't think they ever stop growing. So that croc that's 20 foot long, he might be at least 100 years old, maybe 120. I don't think they really know. But, a really big crocodile is certainly older than the person that hunts it. That's definitely for a fact. I'm not sure, I don't think there's anybody's ever really aged them specifically, but there's stories of 20-foot crocodiles, and the biggest crocodile I've ever heard about was a 26-foot crocodile. And they found skulls of crocodiles. If you take that distance from the nostril to the eye in inches, those crocodiles were 25, 26 foot long. And that skull of that crocodile itself is probably nearly 3.5 feet long, just the skull.
My goodness, jeez. These are interesting animals, and I've heard, what's the deal that for the first, say, 6 years of their life, they think they grow about a foot a year or thereabouts, and then 1 to 2 inches every year after that?
Something like that. Yeah, but that also depends on the environment as well, because in the hotter climates, they probably grow faster than in the colder climates. In southern Africa, where I've experienced, the winter times can get pretty cold, and the Zambezi River gets quite cold, and Lake Kariba gets cold, and I'm sure as it gets cold, their metabolism slows down, they just don't eat. And then when it's hot, when the water gets hot, and it's really in October, that's when the crocs used to come on the bite. Because in my youth, we used to spearfish in Lake Kariba. I think about it now, and it just gives me the crawls, but spearfishing is hunting underwater, and we became absolutely addicted to it. We used to go and skin dive it to the extent that we would go down to Lake Kariba, we wouldn't even take our fishing rods. We just used to skin dive. And if they said if you were underwater and you ever saw a crocodile, the worst thing you do was to try and get away, because nothing in nature is aggressive towards a crocodile. So if you saw a crocodile, you had to swim towards it and punch it or be aggressive towards it, because they didn't know how to handle aggression, which is something easier said than done when you're underwater and you see a bloody big crocodile, for sure. But we used to carry bang sticks. It was a shotgun cartridge on a device, and we had Velcro on our chests of our wetsuits. And so if you got taken by a croc, you could grab this bang stick with either hand. And two of my friends were taken by crocodiles. They both survived, but it was, and one guy tried to get away and he was kicking like crazy, and the crocodile obviously thought his flippers were making bubbles. That was a fish, and it grabbed him on his ankle. But he managed to get away. But eventually, the crocs just became so many that we stopped skin diving, and that was the end of it. But I enjoyed it while it lasted. But I've seen crocodiles underwater, and I actually shot a crocodile underwater with my spear gun once just to get away from it. So, but I'm not very proud of the fact. I think back on it now in my twilight years, and I thought, my God, I was just so damn stupid in those days. But
for the listener, if you want to hear another really hair-raising story about Kevin and some crocodiles in Lake Kariba, check out his book, It Shouldn't Happen. I'll put a link in the show notes where you can get it, but the sort of thing that'll make your skin crawl.
And my dear wife was with me as well when we went swimming amongst the crocodiles.
In that vein that you were just talking about, how they slow down when the temperatures are cooler. So does that mean that, say, like April and May or September, October are better times to hunt them than June or July?
No, I think when it's really cold, when it's cold, then you see they spend more time on the banks basking. I think the best time to hunt them is in the cold months of the year, so they're out of the water a lot more.
I see.
They spend a lot of time trying to get their body temperatures up again. But basically, if you've got lots of crocs, you can hunt a croc all year round. He's going to spend some time out of the water. And crocodiles are territorial. So how we used to hunt crocodiles is that we used to just float the Zambezi. So we'd get in a boat and you just open a beer and you sit and just enjoying the beautiful, and you would just, as you're floating down with your binoculars, you're just scanning the bank. Because crocodiles are also territorial, and they'll have their favorite basking sites. And then that same croc will go, he'll have his favorite spot, and he'll go there every day to get his metabolism up, to bask in the sun. So we used to hunt them by different methods to hunt a crocodile. First of all, the best method is to bait them, because the crocodiles, they're lazy animals, they'll come to bait, and if you put lots of smell in the water, and I'm sure they smell pretty well, and you stake that bait down really well. So the hardest big thing was how do you stake a bait down? And what we used to do, we used to get a really substantial tree log and then dig a big ditch, and we put the tree parallel with the water, the direction of the water, and bury that log under the sand, and then around that log we would attach a nice big chain, and then that chain would attach the meat, and the meat's just in the water, because you don't want to have the meat on the bank, because then the vultures are going to eat it, or the hyena is going to get it. So when you bait a crocodile, you just got to have your bait in shallow water so that you can still get a shot at the croc, but the croc's not going to disappear into deep water if you don't kill him instantly.
Very interesting. So you've talked about how you evaluate crocodile trophy quality really by estimating that distance between their nose and their eyes. Is this a case where males are usually bigger than females?
Oh, yes, definitely. We've never found a female greater than 12 foot. And a 12-foot male crocodile, we would consider that a handbag, It's not a real trophy. But the females' muzzles are more parallel-sided. They're sort of longer and slimmer. But when you get a big male, his head has got a V shape. And those big males get these big knobbles on them. And they quite often lose their teeth as well. And their gums recede. So you see these big teeth sticking out of the side of their mouths, which you don't get those big teeth in a female. So it's very easy to distinguish between a male and a female. And this basically, if it's a big crocodile, it's going to be a male for sure.
Now, you talked about the brain being approximately the size of your thumb in a crocodile, which is just amazing considering how big a 15-foot crocodile is that you're talking about. How big is the heart?
Well, there's a picture of the heart on my book, and that heart, where was it? That's on page 31. The heart's the size of your hand.
Yeah, so once again, not very big.
Yeah, but you're never going to shoot a crocodile in the heart, because if you shoot him in the heart, he's just going to disappear into the water and you'll never find him. So when we talk about shot placement, there's only two shots to hunt a crocodile. You've got to anchor him. And you've got to anchor him by either shoot him in the brain or shoot him in to break his neck just behind the smile. Every crocodile's got this, we call it the smile. And just behind the smile, in the middle of the neck, would be the spinal cord. And I came to realize that when I sort of figured out, or was told, that the brain extends into the spine, that makes me understand now why that spinal shot is so effective, because a spinal shot behind the smile into the middle of the neck is probably equivalent to a brain shot. You probably shoot him in the brain even though you're shooting him in the neck. And if you shatter that spinal cord, or eventually it anchors him, he'll just lie there with his tail flapping backwards and forwards. And then what we used to do then is immediately, so the first shot was always with some form of good quality expanding soft point to get a greater shock effect, to get a bigger wound channel. And you can actually, with a really good soft point, almost like blow the top of the skull off. Also, a soft point through the neck, if it's going to hit the spine, it does much more damage than a solid. But then immediately we would back up with two solids, and we'd shoot them through the shoulder blades and you'd shoot them through the hips. Because if you can't get to that crocodile before he comes alive again, you basically want to break his front and back legs so he can't stand up. So we used to, eventually then we'd always a backing shot, shoot him 2-3 times, or shoot him in the neck or the spine, and then shoot him probably twice to the shoulders and twice to the hips, just to anchor him, to stop him from getting up and walking away again.
So in your book, you demonstrate both like the frontal and the side shot placement for the brain. Have you encountered one more than the other over your years?
The shot of choice was exactly side on. So then you've got your reference point. So you can see from side on, you can see his eye, you can see his ear ridge, you can see the L in the smile, and those three make a little triangle. In the middle of that triangle is his brain. But also the end of the smile, you just got to go back behind the lower jaw. The end of the smile is also a very effective shot. And I've got a picture on page 134 of a big crocodile. You can see that the stick is pointing to, which was that shot into that shot killed that crocodile. But then there was another shot about 3 inches lower, and that just broke the crocodile's lower jaw. So of all the animals that are hunted, the crocodile requires the most precise initial shot placement. And what is the shooting distance? Well, the shooting distance is how far can you hit a golf ball? What distance can you reliably hit a golf ball every time? That's basically what you're aiming at.
Is the crocodile's brain, or excuse me, is its skull, is it very hard, real tough to get through?
It is quite hard. That's why I said that dead tough broke up. But I mean, a good bullet like a Swift A-frame or a Barnes X or a North Fork gets the job done. You probably don't need a solid on that shot if you've got but I wouldn't use any bullet that's not as good quality as those ones, those super premium quality soft points. That's the bullet of choice for that initial shot.
Yeah, I can almost picture, especially with some of these frontal brain shot pictures that you have in here, if you have something that doesn't have enough juice, having it kind of skip off the top of that brain or the skull.
Yeah, you want it to start expanding so it doesn't skip off the top. When I talk about hippos tomorrow, I've got some photographs of a solid bouncing off a hippo skull. So,
oh man.
But you definitely want a bullet that opens and expands. When it gets under the skin, it's not going to come out the other side. But majority of shots are taken from side on, and that's the challenge in your hunting, is setting up your blind and setting up your bait and just ensuring that you try and get your crocodile to lie side on. Also, as he's lying side on, you have a better idea of his length. What we used to do, we used to take 2 nice white stones or 2 wooden pegs and then beat them into the sand exactly 10 foot apart. So we would then use that as a comparison. That's 10 foot, then this crocodile's longer. So it's quite easy when he's lying side on to try and get a better sense of how long he is. Because as I mentioned, when a croc's lying side on to judge his length is extremely difficult.
So this almost sounds like kind of like the setup sort of idea that you were using with leopard, where
yes, like a leopard or a hyena. It's very a lot of thought goes into the process of baiting a crocodile. Definitely.
How common is it to have a chance encounter just on a river with a big crocodile and shoot it there?
We've tried it. I spent many times walking down the Zambezi, looking for bushbuck and things like that. And man, you see that crocodile lying there, and I don't know. I've never been too successful in stalking them because for some reason that they seem to know that you're coming. People do it. Maybe they're lucky. I don't know. But they always have birds hanging around, and those birds seem to warn them. And I'm pretty sure that they certainly smell really well. If you're not walking into the wind, if you're walking with the wind at your back, they'll definitely smell you. Their sense of smell is really good. I think their eyesight is incredible as well. And they're just generally all around pretty smart creatures. They're not animals, they're just creatures. I've never been able to hunt a crocodile just by stalking it, although people do it. But I like the whole process of baiting and all that, because that's where it's a bit like a game of chess. It's a bit like you can predict, or you try and use your ingenuity to get that crocodile to be positioned where you want it to be positioned.
All right, fair enough. So it seems like you like the 375 H&H a lot for crocodile then, huh?
I think it's the perfect, because it's, that shot when you're going to take at a crocodile is going to be from the prone position. And there's a big difference from going from a 375 to one of the 40 calibers. You know, you're getting another probably 50% more recoil. And to shoot a 416 or something like that from lying down from the prone position, it takes a bit of practice to get it right. And the 375 is absolutely adequate. You know, it's just, and I've said before, I believe that's the generates just under 50 foot-pounds or 41 foot-pounds of recoil, which is enough that Mr. Average can handle without a dedicated effort to learn how to shoot that rifle really well. And it's adequate, and it's just shootable, and it doesn't have that pound you as much as a larger caliber when you're having to shoot it from offhand. I mean, from a prone position.
Mm-hmm. And so if you use a good cartridge with a good bullet and you hit that Crocodile where you're supposed to, it's not going to go anywhere after the shot. And so recovery in that situation is going to be very simple and straightforward then, right?
Oh, yeah. Sometimes you need it. But recovery, my experience was those crocs are so damn big, you have to skin them right there and then. You just roll them away from the water. So you not become a target for another crocodile that's going to come cruising past. But everyone that we've hunted, we skinned them right there on the bank because they were just so darn big. You can't. I mean, that big crocodile probably weighs at least a ton. You know, they were the same weight as a buffalo. You know, so and it's sometimes difficult to get your Land Cruiser right down there. And if you've got a boat there, then you need a big boat to put a big crocodile into a big boat. So we would just find it much easier just to skin them on the. And, you know, normally you shoot them during the heat of the day when they're out certainly during the wintertime hunting season, you're going to shoot them in the middle of the day when it's nice and warm and the crocs are out basking, and you've got the whole of the afternoon to skin it. And then you just take a pole and you just roll the skin onto a pole, and then two of your laborers would then walk with the pole between on their shoulder with the skin rolled around the pole. And it was quite an effective way of getting it back. So the recovery is not a problem. You just have to do it on the riverbank.
Was it common when you would guide guys on a crocodile hunt that they were primarily after crocodile, or was it often something in combination with buffalo and plains game or something like that?
Oh, yeah, no, it's always in combination with something else. So you use your buffalo as the bait, so you never just go and hunt a crocodile on its own. Well, I certainly never did it. Mm-hmm. And also you camp. You know, I used to camp on the Zambezi, and of course, if you're on the Zambezi River, then it's just logical that. And there's some seriously big crocodiles there, and it's just such a damn fun hunt to go and hunt a crocodile. It's a challenge, and you know, and it was part of a mixed bag hunt.
And so it seems like a logical thing to do would be to hunt buffalo or plains game in the morning and the evening, and then go after the crocodile, like you said, in the heat of the day.
Oh yeah. And also, you know, we would then go in the afternoon, sometimes just go fishing in the afternoon, because we always used to have a boat when you were fishing on the Zambezi. And then every time you went on the river, you would obviously spotting for crocodiles. And you'd see that same croc, and then you'd go back, and 2 days later, he's lying in the same spot. Well, that's his. Because sometimes we did ambush the crocodiles. We didn't bait them. We would just, if you had a favorite basking site, then you would make sure you got in when he wasn't there, and then you'd build a blind and measure the distance and just basically wait for him to come out. That was also a fairly effective way of doing it.
Now, if someone shoots a crocodile and then does not anchor him properly and that crocodile gets into the water, is that the end of the game, or is there anything else you can do at that point?
Well, it depends if the water's flowing or not. I mean, you know, some of these backwaters, a crocodile gets in, and I've seen lots of guys. You're walking around up to your neck in water, feeling for your feet for the crocodile. I mean, that's...
Oh, my goodness.
It's not for the faint-hearted, and then you finally have to dive down and grab him and things like that. So, no, you plan it really well so that if you anchor him, and that's why we like these little backwaters, because these little backwaters, it's generally quite shallow there. So if he does happen to wriggle forward a little bit, he doesn't disappear into the deep flowing channel of the Zambezi or these places, because then he'll just disappear. But like in places like Lake Kariba, where they hunt a lot of crocodiles on these backwaters, if he does happen to get into the water's not flowing, he'll eventually, he starts to decompose, and eventually they sort of float to the surface. Excuse me. But they will eventually float, but sometimes you have to go and look for them. And then you take a pole and a boat and you go around sort of poking the bottom till you feel something soft or something that's got give in it, and then you have to dive down and and put a rope on his leg and pull it out.
Oh my goodness!
It's one of the PHs. It's a bit like following a wounded leopard. It's one of the things that the PHs don't like doing too much, because you can't rely on your African staff at that stage, because they don't swim and they're not very fond of water. So if you have to go and dive for a crocodile, it's the PH or the learner apprentice has to go and do that. That's all the lousy job that the apprentices get.
Well, so we're kind of touching all around it. How common is it to encounter a crocodile that has killed and eaten a person on a hunt?
Oh, in Mozambique, very common. In Mozambique, in Lake Cabora Bassa, the people there are overfishing the lake. There's just too many people on the lake. They're all fishermen. There's lots of poaching, so all the game that's on the banks, it's been poached out. So humans are the crocodile's food source, and they eat a lot of people. I've got my friends that have hunted there. They open up a crocodile and you find a human leg inside. Or the two of the crocodiles that we shot, one of them had bangles in it, copper bangles.
Okay.
Yeah.
The jewelry.
Jewelry bangles, and one of them had some pangolin scales as well. And one of the crocodiles we've opened his stomach was the front hooves of a buffalo. So So they eat a very varied diet. But the one thing amazing about crocodiles, every crocodile has a whole bunch of stones in their stomach. I've found enough stones to fill up my baseball cap. It's a couple of handfuls of stones. And they need those stones for ballast, because without those stones, a crocodile cannot float horizontally in the water. And places like the Benguelu swamps, up in Botswana and in Zambia, where they have all those kafui lechwe and those lechwe there are crocodiles in those swamps, but there are no stones in those swamps. And the closest stones are 150 miles away. So those crocodiles will swim 150 miles to pick up stones and then return back to the swamps where there are no stones. And as that crocodile is getting bigger and larger, he has to keep on swallowing stones to get his ballast right. But I found a stone with that big crocodile. I was wearing a baseball cap, and the stones out of his stomach filled up my baseball cap full of stones.
Very interesting. My goodness. Things you just don't think about, huh?
Yeah, for sure. Now, they are fascinating creatures. I loved hunting them. It was almost an aquatic leopard hunt, because if you get it right, to get that, and to try and attract that big male that you want, because as they get older, they get smart. They're a bit like an old dugger boy and an old leopard. They don't get old by being stupid. Because people have been hunting those areas for the last 100 years. So those crocs have definitely been around. They've heard the shots. They've learned to be clever. They've learned to be evasive. They've learned all those sort of tactics, and that's what makes them such a challenge.
Yeah, if a 14-foot crocodile, 14, 15, 16-foot crocodile is 70, 80, 90 years old, yeah, they've been around the block a couple times.
That's for sure.
So where are, I assume the Zambezi River is a well-known place for good crocodile. Where else is good for hunting them, would you say, by reputation?
Luangwa River, in the Caprivi Strip, the Kwando River, all the big river systems. The Cabora Bassa in Mozambique, that's got some seriously good crocodiles. So Lake Kariba, Lake Cabora Bassa, the Luangwa, and then the rivers in Namibia, so that would be the Kwando, also the Zambezi as well. And then some of the big rivers in Zambia, which I'm not too familiar with all their names. So any big river system will have crocodiles in them.
And in a river like that, where they have a really healthy population of crocodiles, like how common is it to be seeing them? Are there just crocodiles everywhere in there, or what?
If you look for them, you find them. They're primarily nocturnal. I remember just when Catherine, my wife, and I went swimming amongst the crocodiles, they said there was a crocodile for every 10 meters of shoreline on Lake Kariba. I mean, I think Lake Kariba's got like 5,000 or 6,000 miles of shoreline. You know, was the second biggest man-made lake in the world. Got all these little inlets, and they reckon there's a crocodile for every 10 meters of shoreline. So there are lots of crocodiles. And I think they're a bit like leopards. They're probably more crocodiles than we realize because you don't see them as often.
You know, I've hunted South Africa along the Limpopo quite a bit, and you go out there, and it was unusual to not see a crocodile. Usually not very big, the ones that you're seeing, 6, 7, 8 feet long. But when there's that many of them in there, there's bound to be some real big ones too. Then, huh?
For sure. Yeah, and you see, those are the clever guys. He's just lying there with his nose and his eyes sticking out the water. He's lying under some reeds so you don't see him and things like that. You know, and when he comes out for sunshine, he'll be in a patch where he's made an area for himself in thick reeds, so you can't get close to him, and maybe you still get the sun on his back and things like that.
Well, as we wrap up today, is there anything else that you want to talk about with regards to crocodile?
I think that just about does it, John. I would just recommend if anybody wants an exciting hunt, and they make such unusual trophies as well. You know, the taxidermy on crocodiles now is so fantastic. You know, they really know how to mount these crocodiles really well. One little interesting snippet is that you cannot skin a crocodile's head. That skin is attached so tightly to the skull that you can't get a knife in to cut it off. So when you skin a crocodile, you take off his body, but the skin remains on his head. And I've sent you those pictures today of those 3 big crocodiles from Lake Kariba. You can actually see that the skulls are still in those mouths because you can't get the skull out.
Interesting. So what are some of the common things that people like to do with them? I assume that getting a good skull mount is very popular then, right?
A skull mount it is spectacularly impressive. Yeah. So you'll have a skull mount, and then you just have that skin. It's just this flat skin on the floor, like a zebra skin, or you can have it on a wall or something like that. But a big skull mount is extremely impressive. I've seen people make coffee tables out of them. You know, have it underneath a glass coffee table, things like that. They're just a nice thing to have. I mean, and then it's quite easy to see when immediately you can see from the size of these skulls how big they are. You know, a good skull's 3 foot long, you know, so it makes an really impressive mount. Or you just have it on a table, or you have it on somewhere where people can admire it.
And so a really big old crocodile is probably going to have some broken teeth in there and things like that too. A lot of character.
Yeah, just lots of character. Broken teeth, missing teeth. You know, some of those teeth are the size of your thumb. You know, they're huge.
Whew, my goodness. Well, man. Well, this once again, always a pleasure to speak with you, Kevin. And tonight was also very interesting. I learned a lot about crocodiles that I never even knew that I didn't know.
Good, John. It's only my pleasure. I look forward to chatting to you about hippos soon.
All right. Take care. As always, I thought that was a great discussion. Kevin's a great guest to have on the show. I always learn a lot and find it to be very interesting, and I hope you do too. Like I mentioned earlier, follow me on Instagram at The Big Game Hunter to check out those photos Kevin mentioned in the interview today. In that vein, would you be interested in meeting Kevin in person to listen to him talk about some of the topics we've covered in this podcast in more detail, like elephant conservation, lion and buffalo hunting, etc.? Let me know if you're interested, and maybe we can organize an in-person get-together here in the near future. This might be in combination with a hunt, and by the way, let me know if you're interested in that too, like I asked a couple weeks ago, or it might be its own thing separate. If we get enough interest, I will probably set it up over a weekend somewhere in Texas because that's where Kevin and I both live. Email me, john@thebiggamehuntingblog.com, or send me a direct message on Instagram. Once again, handle is @thebiggamehunter. Let me know if you're interested, and we'll see what we can do. As we wrap up today, be sure you subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app and sign up for my email list, huntingguns101.com. go to thebiggamehuntingblog.com/Kevin, and you can pick up copies of his books there. And especially if you don't already have it, It Shouldn't Happen is a very entertaining read. Definitely worth the money to buy that one. And the same thing goes with The Perfect Shot. All of these links are available in the show notes as well. And Kevin will be back next week to talk about hippopotamus hunting, so don't miss that episode. Now, the fact that you are listening to this podcast means that you are serious about making your dreams come true. Remember, you can make your dream hunt turn into a reality, and we can help. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you back here next time on the Big Game Hunting Podcast.
This show may be over, but we have plenty more for you on our website. For more information on today's topic, as well as lots of other useful hunting resources, head over to thebiggamehuntingblog.com. We look forward to having you back for the next episode. But until then, happy hunting.